Are you totally confused about whether or not an LLC is right for your online business? Then stay tuned, because in today's video, I break down everything you need to know. Let's do this. Hi, my name is Jim Hart. I'm the founding attorney here at Hawthorn Law, where we help online businesses to get their legal house in order so that you can focus on what you do best, and that is building a business that truly matters in the world. Today, I want to talk to you about LLCs, the ins, the outs, and everything in between that you need to know about whether or not an LLC is going to be right for your online business. If you're like most of the online entrepreneurs that I work with, you want to make sure that your business is completely and totally legally protected. But unfortunately, I think it goes without saying that there are so many options out there for how you can set up your online business properly that it literally could make your mind explode. You've got your sole proprietorships, you've got your partnerships, you've got your corporations, and then of course, you've got your LLCs. And while it may not doom your business to failure, making the wrong choice can have a serious financial impact on your business, because you might have to hire a lawyer, pay expensive filing fees, and waste a lot of time trying to undo the mistake that you may or may not have made in the first place. And so today I want to go over what an LLC is, cover some of the drawbacks of forming an LLC, as well as going over some of the benefits of why you might form an LLC versus some of the other options that are out there. Sound good? Let's jump into this. All right, so LLC stands for Limited Liability Company. Now, an LLC is a business entity just like any other entity that you might hear of out there, such as corporations, sole proprietorships, partnerships. All these things are considered business entities. And what that means is it is an entity that's separate apart from you as an individual person that is doing business. And the main reason you would form an LLC or a limited liability company for your business is because you want the limited liability asset protection that comes with that entity. In other words, you want to make sure that your personal assets are protected in the event that your business were to get sued. So if you have assets like a home or other investment properties, if you have personal wealth in the form of bank accounts and savings accounts, if you have trusts that you might control, if you have vehicles, artwork, antiques, other valuable personal property, maybe even other businesses that you own, if run correctly, an LLC would protect all of those assets in the event that your online business got sued. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't have an LLC if you don't have any of those things, but one of the main benefits being the limited liability nature of an LLC lends itself to people that have assets that they want to protect. It's important that you understand that sole proprietorships and partnerships do not provide this level of asset protection. And if you're thinking, well, that's great, but why don't I just form a corporation? Well, there are a couple reasons why we typically would prefer an LLC over a corporation. Number one, an LLC is just simpler to form and manage than a corporation. And number two, when you're talking about a C corporation specifically, the income you earn from that corporation is subject to what is called double taxation. And what that means is that any profit distributions that you would pay yourself from that corporation are considered dividends. So the corporation is going to file and pay its own income taxes, but then anything that is left over after that that's distributed as a profit distribution to you, you would also have to pay tax on as a dividend. That's the double taxation in a nutshell. One of the big benefits of forming an LLC is you can elect how you want to be taxed. Now, the default method of taxation, if you are an LLC, is to be taxed as a disregarded entity. Also, basically, you'd be taxed the same as a sole proprietorship. This means you're going to pay self-employment taxes and income taxes on any income you receive from the LLC. But with an LLC, as opposed to operating a straight sole proprietorship, if you earn enough money and it makes sense to do so, you can elect to be taxed as an S corporation, which can be a huge financial benefit for people in the right situation. So in preparing for this video, I went over and kind of looked at the main benefits to forming an LLC, and I really found that there are 8 main benefits to forming an LLC as the entity of choice for your online business. The first main benefit is that your LLC can be perpetual, meaning it can exist in perpetuity. It can exist forever if that's what you wanted to do. The second main benefit of forming an LLC is that it can be owned by other companies. A lot of you have questions about whether or not you should form a holding company. You can form a holding company and it can be owned by, sometimes I just jarble over my words a little bit. You can form a holding company that can own your LLC. Make sense? The third main benefit of owning an LLC is that annual meetings are not necessarily required. Next, the fourth main benefit is that, as I mentioned before, the income or losses from the LLC will be reported directly on your personal tax return, which means you don't have to file a separate tax return just for your LLC. The fifth main benefit, and I've already kind of gone over this, is the limited liability protection that comes with an LLC. And then the next benefit, going down this tax rabbit hole again, is that with an LLC, as opposed to a sole proprietorship, allows you to elect to be taxed as an S corporation, which again, if you're making enough money and you're in the right situation, can be a huge financial benefit. I've talked about that in a lot of other videos on my channel that you may want to check out. The next main benefit of forming an LLC is that you can issue membership interests, which are very similar to stock in a corporation, but for an LLC, it's called a membership interest. And then finally, the last main benefit of forming an LLC, and this is slightly different than owning a corporation, is that the amount of the membership interest that you could receive does not have to be tied directly to the financial contribution that you make to the LLC. So in other words, if you're in partnership with somebody and one of you is going to be putting in a lot of money into the partnership and the other person is going to be putting in a lot of sweat equity into the partnership, you still could be 50-50 partners, even though one person invested all of their money into the LLC and the other person invested a lot of time and effort and sweat equity. This is different than a corporation, where if the one person that invested all the money into the corporation would be basically a 100% shareholder, the other person could not be a shareholder of the corporation unless they put in an amount of money, and the amount of shares that they would purchase in the corporation would be tied to the amount of money they contributed. All right, a couple other things that you need to know about the membership interest of an LLC, and this is really important. An LLC can be formed as either a member-managed or a manager-managed LLC. Most online businesses are going to start out as member-managed, which means the owners of the LLC, the members, would manage the operations of the LLC. As you grow and start to bring on employees and earn more revenue, you may come to a point in time where you want to switch over and become a manager-managed LLC. And in that situation, you basically would hire somebody to come in and serve as the manager of the LLC, but they would not necessarily have an ownership stake in the LLC. A couple other nuances that you really need to know about an LLC: you can have a single-member LLC or a multi-member LLC. A single-member LLC is owned by one person. A multi-member LLC is owned by more than one person. Now, where I get a lot of questions from people is, what about a husband and wife team? Would that be a single member LLC or a multi-member LLC? Now, this is kind of different than if you're forming a sole proprietorship. A sole proprietorship, well, number one, you don't really have to file anything with the sole proprietorship. It just kind of is. It's the default. And if you're a husband and wife team, you're still going to be a sole proprietorship as opposed to a partnership, which is if you have more than one sole proprietor that are in partnership together. With an LLC, however, it is a little bit different. If you have a husband and wife team, then you're going to be considered a multi-member LLC. And the main distinction here is that when you have that multi-member LLC, you're going to have to file a separate tax return for the LLC that's going to show how much money the LLC made and how much money each of the members earned in proportion to their membership interest. Now, there are exceptions to this rule where a husband and wife can be considered a single member LLC, but that's kind of beyond the scope of this video, and that's something I'm going to get into today. All right, before we talk about why you might want to form an LLC, let's talk about some of the drawbacks of forming an LLC. An LLC is not perfect, just like any business entity. There's all these benefits, but there's a lot of drawbacks as well. The first main drawback of forming an LLC is obviously it takes money to form. It's not free. You have to pay money to your Secretary of State's office. You may have to pay a lawyer to file this for you. You may have to pay a DIY service to file this for you. So it's not a free thing to go out and file an LLC. The second consideration you really need to think about is there's an annual filing fee that comes with an LLC. And this goes on every single year that you want to stay in business as your LLC. And this can be hefty in some states, such as California, where it's $800 a year. So this alone might be enough to deter you from filing your LLC. Third main drawback of an LLC is you have to pay some money to hire a registered agent. Assuming that you want to make sure you're protected and you want to keep that corporate veil in place, you want to have a registered agent who can accept any type of legal documents on behalf of the LLC. And this person is someone that needs to be in business between the hours of 9 to 5, every day of the year to accept service. And I say this is especially important for online entrepreneurs because many of you want the time and financial freedom and location freedom that comes with operating your online business. And if you're not going to be home or at the address of the business on a regular basis, then you really need to have a registered agent who is available to accept service of legal documents on your behalf. Along those same lines, another drawback of forming an LLC is that you have to have a business address. Now, this could be your home address in some situations. I've talked about this in other videos, but typically it's going to be a virtual address or a post office box that has a street address tied to it. And again, this just costs more money. Another drawback of having an LLC is that you have to draw up an operating agreement and you have to make sure that operating agreement stays updated. Again, that's just one more thing to do. And then finally, there's a bunch of other things that you need to make sure that you do to make sure your LLC stays up to date and active and is maintained properly so that you're actually protected in the event that there would be a lawsuit against your business. Because that's the whole point of forming an LLC anyway. Why would you form it and then not do everything you need to do to protect it to keep that corporate veil in place? Doesn't make much sense. So my question for you today is, should you form an LLC? I don't know the answer to that question. I'm a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer, so I can't really answer that question for you. If you need that LLC to protect you against lawsuits, if you need that LLC to make you more credible in your business, and if you need that LLC to give you those tax benefits that come with electing an S corporation status, then an LLC might be a good choice for you. If on the other hand, you don't have a whole lot of money to protect, you're not making a whole lot of money in your business, you're just getting started, you may not need it right yet, then you don't need to form an LLC. But again, I'm not your lawyer. I can't answer that question for you. You need to make that decision on your own. So whether you decide that you need an LLC or not, I hope this video gave you a little bit more clarity on how to come about that decision. If you'd like to learn more about whether or not you should form an LLC for your online business, here's some other videos right over here that go into greater detail about things you need to know about forming an LLC and possible mistakes that you could make in the process. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.